The Dallas Cowboys play Santa on this Christmas night. The tree is adorned with ornaments bright. If your holiday gifts have been quite enough, a Lone Star Kris Kringle still has more stuff. Unwrap that box labeled number 22. Emmitt Smith with the football is another gift for you. He scored 24 touchdowns in this Super Bowl drive. It's an NFL record if he gets 25. Tonight you'll be getting a true football feast. The Cowboys are champs of the NFC East. Troy Aikman with his star so bright will lead the Cowboys offense tonight. Doesn't that A look like a snowman? Will a big game tonight be a Super Bowl omen? Yesterday the Cowboys got some gifts of their own. The Eagles and Niners had opportunities blown. When Troy throws the ball, it often comes down in the hands of Michael Irvin for a Dallas touchdown. 106 catches should make you a believer. Another Pro Bowl awaits this great receiver. Tonight they will play through your eyes to see for home field advantage in the old NFC. These Christmas goodies should give you a reason to watch this final game of the regular season. Arizona Cardinals are the Cowboys' next test as St. Nick begins a well-deserved rest. Santa's job's done. His year's complete. Now he can watch these teams compete. The Cowboys continue their Super Bowl mission. It's Monday Night Football, a Christmas edition.
From the men who brought you basically a sports show, if your football fix wasn't met on Thursday night, it's time for an additional slice. This is basically a football show right now. Let's go!
Let's knock them on their backs, butt them in the mouth, knock their ass in the dirt. That's what we got to do.
Get in here. I got one thing to say. This is when the big dogs come out. Okay? You can't roll with the big dogs. Stay on the board. We're going to be here all day, baby. I like this kind of party. I like this kind of party, baby.
His method is not Grand Prix, but Demolition Derby.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, football fans around the world, we're almost done with the regular season in the NFL, and this is basically a football show where we'll tell you all about it. I'm Zach, along with me is Greg. And Greg, we're down to the last week of the season. We're down to the last day. There's no Thursday game this week. There's no Saturday games, no Monday games. One final Sunday of NFL action. And, I mean, for the most part, everything's locked up. Just some seeding to be dealt with, and, you know, whoever's going to be the last wild card in the AFC.
Yeah, it's kind of disappointing. We're going into the final weekend, and there really isn't a whole lot, other than the NFC South, where we've got the winner-take-all thing. Mm-hmm. And I guess Packers, Lions, and Steelers, Bengals, basically for the division title. But really, are there even any playoff spots that aren't? I think we've got the AFC's got one slot that's not guaranteed yet. And that's about it, right?
Yeah, there's only two spots that have not been clinched. That's the NFC South, which will either be Atlanta or Carolina, whoever wins this week. And then the sixth seed in the AFC, which right now is San Diego, and basically, and they're a winning or in situation,
right?
Against against who is San Diego playing this week?
Chiefs.
Oh my goodness, the Chiefs. Yeah, but the Chiefs, they also need to win because they can sneak in if everybody in front of them loses.
Yeah, there's still some scenarios where some teams. I mean, Houston is still mathematically alive for a playoff spot,
right? Yeah, San Diego, Baltimore, Houston, Kansas City. Those are the four teams that are alive for the last spot in the AFC. Miami and Buffalo are also 8-7, but they would not win any of the tiebreakers no matter what happens.
Yeah,
so.
And I always say that when you're in a Houston situation where you're mathematically alive, but it's kind of like when your girlfriend says she wants to see other people, it's pretty much over.
Well, not necessarily. Like, because Houston is playing Jacksonville.
Right.
And now Houston doesn't exactly have any quarterbacks either, but that didn't stop them from beating the Ravens yesterday.
That was a big surprise, and we'll get to that. But, yeah, go ahead.
And the Ravens are playing the Browns with Brian Hoyer.
That's the X factor to me.
And the Chargers are playing the Chiefs. And if the Chargers could very, very easily lose that game.
Sure.
And the Ravens could lose to the Browns. It's not out of the question. So if those two teams lose and the Texans beat the Jaguars, who should be lying down because they need to, secure that number 3 overall pick.
Right.
Then maybe the Texans sneak in the back and get crushed by either Pittsburgh or Cincinnati.
Well, and that's what I mean. If Baltimore was playing anyone other than the Browns, I would say there's a really good, not a really good chance, but a shot at it coming through for Houston. But you've got Baltimore at home playing for their playoff lives against a Cleveland team that really has nothing to play for other than an 8-8 season. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but watching the Browns I've seen for these last 6-7 weeks, I don't see it happening. So I wish that the Browns weren't going to play a role in this, because if there was a team that was that was more competitive, we could really have some interesting stuff play out this weekend. But with the Browns in the mix, I just don't see it happening.
Yeah.
But I would love to see Houston sneak in. I just don't see how it's possible at this point. Unless the Browns, you never know. Maybe Brian Hoyer goes out and tries to prove a point, and they play a good football game, and they beat the Ravens. I mean, who knows?
They've played good football games this year.
Yeah.
They have. It's just, and one of them was, how long did they lose to the Ravens? It was like 2 points or whatever?
Yeah.
In Cleveland?
Yeah.
So it's possible. It's not out of the realm of
they're
possible.
certainly capable of it. It just depends on if they show up and want to do it.
Right.
The Ravens, when they lost to a quarterback that was on the street 2 weeks ago at home, or were they in Texas? I don't remember.
They were in Houston.
But still, I mean, I'm recanting what I said earlier, that the Ravens are the best team in that division. I'm sticking with my preseason pick, which was the Steelers to win the NFC North, and I think they're going to pull it off.
Yeah, it's that scares me, but yes. But let's get into the week of football, and we can get through all the scenarios. We'll start on Thursday real quick, as we talked about it on basically a sports show. If you heard the battle between two teams already looking ahead to next season, as the Jaguars pull one out over the Titans, 21-13. The Titans ever so close to the end of this thing, and maybe a number one overall pick if things break their way.
Yeah, that was a bad game all around, and the best thing I can say about it is my irrational confidence Titans now have a shot to get Marcus Mariota, which I think would be, if there's a spot that kid needs to land, the best spot for him is in Tennessee. I really believe that. Tampa maybe too, but as long as it's not New York or a big market, he's going to be great, I think.
Yep.
But yeah, what a waste of time that thing was.
I mean, national primetime, the last Thursday game of the year, and this is what they give us. But, what are you going to do? Then we'll move on to Saturday, where we had two games, two very interesting games.
Very interesting.
The first game was the Eagles traveling down to Washington, where Washington pulls out a 27-24 win over the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Eagles just... they were barely hanging on to any hope of the playoffs as it was, but that was just a terrible performance.
Well, we talked about
especially to let up what Washington did against them with RG3 back in there.
The thing of it was, we talked about it when Nick Foles went down, that Mark Sanchez, you don't want to bank your season on Mark Sanchez. And yeah, he looked okay for a little while there. But there's a reason he's Mark Sanchez. There's a reason we think of him as Mark Sanchez, because like all things, sports-related, things generally regress towards the mean. He played pretty good for a while, but eventually he became the guy that has too many turnovers. And, we talk about how the Cardinals season kind of fell out from under him. Mm-hmm. Same thing happened to the Eagles. I mean, they hung on for a little while, but, they went from a preseason possible Super Bowl pick to not even making the playoffs now, and it's just it's too bad.
Do you think they'd be really that much different with Nick Foles, though?
I don't know. Honestly, they still got a lot of issues.
They have Nick Foles. I still don't think they make the playoffs right now with the way the NFC's stacked up.
Yeah, well, one thing that we got to think about, too, is that no one expected the Dallas Cowboys to be where they are this season.
Yeah. True.
When you look at that division at the beginning of the season, the Eagles were clearly a cut above everybody else based on what we knew going into the season. And now this Cowboys team is all of a sudden, you're looking at them going, hey, these guys might actually be able to make a Super Bowl run here, because they're the one team that's proven they can beat Seattle in Seattle. And so it's going to get very interesting as the playoffs come along. But, the Eagles at the beginning of the season were one thing. As the season progressed, they were another. And then when they lost Foles and went to Sanchez, it was kind of like, well, that's that.
But at the same token, this is kind of almost similar to what they did last year, where they kind of started off hot and everyone was like, oh, my God, the Eagles, look at them. And then they kind of slowly petered off toward the end. I mean, they made the playoffs last year, and lost to the Saints. But I don't know. A lot of people in Philadelphia are starting to get on Chip Kelly already in his second year after he took him to the playoffs 1 year.
Not surprising in Philly, not at all.
Yeah, they're railing on the defense, they're railing on his offensive schemes, and I don't know. I mean, they did kind of bungle it at the end with kind of time management, basically allowing the Redskins to go down and run the clock out and kick the game-winning field goal.
That's something that we've seen play out. I mean, the most famous example of it this season was Mike Smith against the Browns.
Right.
But these guys are NFL head coaches. You got Andy Reid's got problems with that. You've got some big-name coaches. I don't get it. It would seem to me like that would be the easiest thing to look at the clock. Okay, here's what we have to do. You're thinking ahead. I don't get it.
Yeah. But anyway, so the Eagles, they weren't eliminated by this game, but by the end of the weekend, they would not be in the playoffs. And, of course, Washington is terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, the news out of Washington, though, is that despite what everyone had thought, Jay Gruden and RG3 are going to stay in Washington next year, supposedly.
Well, that'll be a nice soap opera for us to follow next season.
Yeah.
I'm a little surprised by that because the talk a few weeks ago was that they were both, one or the other was gone or possibly both. And,
I mean, maybe they're going to just try to let this thing play through and maybe it'll get better, but I don't see it getting better.
I don't know. We've said twice this season Colt McCoy was relieved by RG3. I don't know how if you've got a guy that you don't think is good enough to start over Colt McCoy, you might want to reassess things. But then again, these are the Washington Redskins, and that's the way they do things.
Indeed. And moving on to the Saturday night game, and what a game that was.
That was really fun to watch.
Chargers pull this one out in overtime, 38-35. The Niners looked great at the start of this game. They looked like they were trying to prove a point in what's supposedly the final days of Jim Harbaugh in the Bay. The 49ers go up 21 points 2 different times in the first half. And then the Chargers rally 14 points in each of the third and fourth quarters, tie the game. They go into overtime. They get an interception, and that sets up the game-winning overtime field goal. And the Chargers stay in that number 6 seed in the AFC with a miraculous win. They've had a few of those this year. 38-35 over the 49ers in their brand-new stadium, where the 49ers are 3-4 in Levi's Stadium.
Though, if you look back over the history of new stadiums, I've noticed that the first year or two, they don't really provide much of a home field advantage. It takes a while for that to happen. I don't know why, but yeah, what a comeback by the Chargers. The thing of it was that it didn't seem like to me at any point that the 49ers were kind of choking it away.
No.
It just kind of happened. And
right.
And it was I mean, all credit to Phillip Rivers and the Chargers. I mean, that was a really nice job because they're not going to make the playoffs. They're not good offensively at all, but that 49ers defense is very, very strong. And for them to come back down 21 and tie it and take it to OT and win it, wow. They were you've got the Cowboys in December, you get the Chargers in December. One has a reputation for being horrible. The other one becomes like unbeatable in December. I don't understand it.
They have Phil Rivers, 356 yards and 4 touchdown passes. Single-handedly defeated me in fantasy this week. Thanks, Phil. They're coming on strong right now, and this is kind of what they did last year.
Yeah.
So we'll see what they can do against Kansas City this week to hope lock down a playoff spot. And I mean, if things could break out in a way where they get the 6th seed, and if Cincinnati beats Pittsburgh this week, then it'll be a repeat of last year. And I would almost put money on the Chargers to go in if they had to go into Cincinnati. I think the Chargers can go into Cincinnati and beat them again, just like they did last year.
Cincinnati's got a pretty spotty playoff history to begin with, and the Chargers, you're right, it's the same situation as last year. I would have to pick the Chargers in that game. The thing is, though, the Chiefs, it all depends. The Chiefs are eliminated, right? They can't win any of the tiebreakers. They're done, right?
They can still get in.
Oh, can they?
If they win, and Houston, San Diego, and Baltimore all lose.
Okay, so the Chiefs will have something to play for.
Yes.
Oh, there's still going to be some really intense, good games. But, this Chargers team, well, if they play like they did against the 49ers on Saturday, I like them against anybody in the AFC. But that's the question is which team you're going to get, kind of like with Cincinnati. You never know what you're going to get. But I think this AFC, even though the Patriots are lining up as like they've got the number one seed, home field throughout, there's a couple teams I think can go into New England and beat those guys. And I think the Chargers are one of them if they can get that far.
It's possible. But then again, if Pittsburgh wins this week and the Chargers have to go to Pittsburgh, I think that's a whole different ball game.
Yeah,
but that could also be an extremely high scoring game.
Yeah.
If Ben Roethlisberger all of a sudden is just throwing things down the field like he's Joe Flacco.
Well, he's suddenly in a couple of shows I've listened to, he suddenly popped into the MVP race. I don't necessarily think he has, but people are saying, well, what about Ben Roethlisberger? Well, that MVP debate, we can have that on an off week or something. But yeah, this is there's a couple teams in here that are going to be dangerous, I think, and San Diego's one of them if they get there.
If they get there, and all they have to do is they're the only ones completely in control of their destiny. Win and they're in this week. But let's move on to Sunday, and we'll start with the earlier games. We'll start down in Miami, where there was a really entertaining football game. Two teams not making the playoffs, but just a back and forth game between the Vikings and the Dolphins that ends on a safety, a blocked punt into the end zone for a safety. The first time in NFL history a team has taken the lead on a safety in the final minute of the game as the Dolphins pull one out 37-35 over Minnesota. Just I got to see the end of the game because they did the thing where they will take you to bonus coverage at this game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a hell of a way to win a football game.
It was a really entertaining game, and I was thinking about this before we recorded today. I thought there are some teams in the league right now that how much would they love it if the season started at week 8? And I think the Vikings are one of those teams. They're playing good football. Now, they lost the game to the Dolphins, but still, Teddy Bridgewater's shown himself to be a pretty capable quarterback, best of the rookies, I think.
Yes.
And I'm just thinking about that team, and I've heard this mentioned on numerous shows. What would that team have been this year had Adrian Peterson played the full season?
Yeah,
that's a whole. I don't.
True.
But maybe it's a whole different thing. I don't know. But it was a very entertaining football game. I was flipping back and forth between that and all my other Sunday ticket stuff. But yeah, it was a wild one, and on a safety of all things.
Yeah, and Ryan Tannehill shows that he's quietly one of the better young quarterbacks in the league. It's just the Dolphins tend to lose those dumb games. I mean, he threw for 396 and 4 touchdowns on Sunday. And the Vikings defense isn't, anything to really get afraid of, but they're still an NFL quality defense. They're not terrible. But Ryan Tannehill is a pretty good quarterback.
Yeah, he is.
He's just the Dolphins have that tendency to lose those dumb games, and they're 8-7. I mean, technically, they're one game out of the wild card. I mean, they're just so far down the tiebreakers that there's no way for them to actually get in. But if they don't lose some of those dumb games earlier in the year, and even if like say the game against the Packers with the fake spike,
right? If
they win that game, they're right there in the playoff right here in the playoff talk going into the last week of the season.
That game, if you look at that game, that little game with that little play have such far-reaching implications and ramifications in the playoff picture. Because if the Packers, it's one of those plays you look at it and you go, if he had just run the receiver out of bounds, the game's over.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, the Packers are possibly on the outside looking in, and you've got the Dolphins right in the thick of it. It's just funny how one play like that, back in what was like week 5 or something, could all of a sudden be just this big deal. But
you look at them, they lost at Buffalo in week 2. They lost to the Lions by 4 points.
Right.
They lost to Denver by 3 points. They lost at home to Baltimore a couple weeks ago. Those are all games that, if things just bounce a little bit differently, they're in the playoffs right now.
Yeah, and what do you think the Dolphins need? I mean, I think they've got a good quarterback. I think you're right. Tannehill is quietly one of the better quarterbacks. I tell you what, I would take him over anybody the Browns have run out this season.
That's true, yeah.
But what do they need? I mean,
I think they
Jarvis Landry's looking pretty good as a receiver.
Yeah, I think they need a little bit more up front on defense.
Yeah.
Need some pressure on the quarterback. Because, I mean, you let up 35 points to the Vikings.
Right.
And Teddy Bridgewater's good. He's fine. But 35 points to the Vikings, 41 points to New England, 28 points to Baltimore, 39 points to Denver a couple weeks ago. they need to shore up the defense a little bit. Just look at their stats, especially running the ball. They're 24th in the league with opponent rushing yards. So they just need to. I think they just solidify that front four for front seven, and they could be something to deal with next year.
Yeah, they could be a good draft away from being a really serious contender because they showed signs this year. I mean, they beat New England pretty handily back early in the season. Mm-hmm. They've won some good games, but then they've lost bad games, and they a good draft away, I think. But it'll be curious to see how they play out. Yeah,
some help on defense and just the fortitude to not lose some stupid games and win those tight ones. And they could be right
Joe
there.
Philbin's coming back, right? They've already said he's coming back as their coach. Okay.
Yeah, they announced he was going to be coming back, which I thought was a little interesting but he again, like we've talked about, he's had them playing well. People probably expect them to be in the playoffs by this point. I mean, I did. I picked them to be in the playoffs at the beginning of this.
We all liked them going into the season. They were kind of the sleeper, could be a really good team kind of thing. Right. And for a couple weeks, so they looked like they might be that. But
yeah. So they're going to give Joe Philbin one more kick of the can, and we'll see how that turns out next year. Moving on with the early games, we'll go to the game we mentioned earlier with the Ravens and the Texans. The Texans somehow won this game without a quarterback. Case Keenum comes in, only 185 yards, but the Texans pull out a victory, 25-13. Just 3 turnovers forced by the Houston defense, a couple interceptions to get them right into deep into Ravens territory. Terrible game by Joe Flacco, who threw the ball 50 times and only got 195 yards of offense.
Yeah, I saw his stat line, and it was bad. Yeah,
so the Texans, the defense, that's it. It's the defense that pushes them forward, and they get that 25-13 win at home and stay alive in going into Week 17 for the final spot in the AFC.
Yeah, and you want to talk about getting killed by somebody in fantasy? I almost played their kicker, Randy Bullock, I think's his name. Uh-huh. And instead, I went with the Broncos kicker because for some reason, I had it in my head that Denver would have a tough time scoring touchdowns. They'd kick a lot of field goals. Well, Bullock put up 18 points, and I left him sitting on the bench. But
yeah, and I cut the Texans defense going into this week. So shame on.
But yeah, the Texas team, they're they need a quarterback, obviously. Ryan Mallett will be back next year. They're headed in the right direction. A nice comeback season for them this year, and they're still in the playoff hunt. And the Ravens, I don't know what to make of this team. I mean, they win games you think they should lose. They lose games you think they should win. And I am taking away the fact that I think they're the best team in the AFC North. I don't think that anymore.
If the Texans manage to squeak into the playoffs, they should beat Jacksonville because Jacksonville should be laying down and they should be playing as hard as they can to get into the playoffs. But if they do squeak into the playoffs with the tiebreakers, can we give J.J. Watt the MVP? Do you think that would get him to the top of that MVP conversation?
If they make the playoffs, you got to take a real serious look at him.
Because they don't have a quarterback at this point.
No.
And if they make the playoffs without having a quarterback over the last several weeks, and it's not like the Cardinals where they were well ahead of everybody else before they started losing quarterbacks. This was them fighting their way into the playoffs with a quarterback, and it's all being led by the defense. And every time he's on the field, he's getting double, triple teamed, freeing up the rest of the defense to do what they're doing.
And he's still getting a sack and still making plays despite being triple teamed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think if the Texans make the playoffs, you got to give him just as good of a shot as anybody else because. Really, we wait for like a dominant season, and there hasn't been that this year when it comes to the MVP race. Guys have stepped up, like Aaron Rodgers stepped up, and then he kind of falls back with the last couple games with the loss of Buffalo and stuff like that. Tom Brady just kind of cruising along, and maybe you give it to him just because he's on the best team with and having a decent season for him. But
the argument you can make, and like Aaron Rodgers in particular, I don't get. Because there's a lot of people that think he's a shoo-in for this MVP award, and I think have you watched him play on the road this year?
Right.
They're not. I think they score 7 at Detroit. They just haven't been a good road team. I mean, he threw for 318 yards on Sunday, but they managed to get in the end zone one time. Yeah. I just don't know that he's the guy that. I don't think he's as clear-cut a choice as a lot of people do. But to me, I guess it comes down to. The most valuable player is the guy that your team would be a lot worse without. Well, obviously the quarterbacks, that's going to play a big role. But then there's the argument, too, how much worse would the Texans be without J.J. Watt?
Oh, yeah, they'd be like a 4-win team.
Yeah. And to me, if you got a defensive player, defensive lineman in particular, that I think we can all agree has been good for at least 3 or 4 wins this season, how can he not be the MVP?
Mm-hmm.
You're right. They're doing all this without a quarterback, without much offense, and they're in the playoff hunt. And it's mostly because of him.
No, for sure. If I had a vote and the Texans managed to sneak into the playoffs this week, I would throw all my support behind J.J. Watt. Just, he's having one of those all-time defensive seasons, and really just leading the team to victories. I mean, hell, he's still catching touchdown passes. I'm still firmly of the belief that they should just throw him under center and see what the hell happens. It can't be any worse than what they're doing, right?
Right. I agree. I absolutely agree that. I mean, it would be fun to see. I don't know if he could pass for 300 yards for anything, but why not?
Hey, he could do something with it.
But yeah, he's. That's the thing, though. It's such a passing, quarterback-driven league now that it's going to be really tough to get people to get behind a defensive player as the MVP, which I think is wrong. And because I think it's like I said last week, we need a separate award just for quarterbacks. There's something called just the best player. If there was a best player in football award, J.J. Watt wins it hands down, no question about it.
Yep.
But
pound for pound.
But
pound
yeah, if they make the playoffs, yeah, he's got to be seriously considered. I think I agree with that.
Let's move on to the NFC North. And the Lions, they got to 11-4 now with a 20-14 win over the Bears. But they weren't very impressive going against Jimmy Clausen and the Bears.
Not at all.
I mean, they go into Lambeau this week for the NFC North title game. I want the Lions to win this game. I do. But I don't see how they can. I mean, they haven't been playing. They were playing great up until the last week or two. But even then, they've had games where they just haven't looked terribly impressive. I mean, you get 20-14 over Chicago this week, 16-14 over Minnesota the week before, and then back-to-back blowouts of Chicago and Tampa, an evisceration by New England. And they lost in Week 11 to the Cardinals, 14-6. And I think that was when Drew Stanton was starting for the Cardinals at that point.
The thing with the Lions is their offense is obviously a real problem. They've got a great defense. I mean,
the defense is great. The offense is kind of mercurial, if you want to use a word. You've
got Matt Stafford, who was a number 1 overall pick, pretty good quarterback. He's shown that he can play. You've got the best wide receiver in football. A pretty decent running game, some pretty good complementary receivers too. I don't know why this team can't score points. I don't get it. I mean, it makes no sense to me. But if they have the defense certainly to stop the Packers at Lambeau, but they don't have the offense to keep up with them, and that's going to be their problem. They're in the playoffs, but unless they can figure out a way to score, I don't see them going very far. But if they do find a way to score, I like them as a dark horse Super Bowl pick.
Yeah, I mean, Joique Bell has been decent at running back. Reggie Bush is always good. Calvin Johnson's having kind of a down year.
Yeah.
He got 103 yards on Sunday, but no touchdowns. And
he was hurt for a while too.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. But I mean, if you're going against the Bears when they bench Jay Cutler and they start Jimmy Clausen, come on, you got to do something.
You can't struggle to beat that team. And
right, the Bears were up at one point.
I know
they were up 14-10.
If Chicago could have found a way to, I think if I remember right, I was watching part of that game, and they even got a turnover, but couldn't convert it into points. I mean, if Chicago hadn't been as inept as they were, they win that game. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was just Detroit. It was just the Lions were not impressive at all, and I didn't like the fact too the defense has kind of gone back to the defense of old, where they're stomping on people, and there was a really cheap shot on Jimmy Clausen that knocked his head off, but
yeah. Jimmy Clausen got a concussion on that play, so Jay Cutler now back into the saddle for the Bears next week. But yeah,
they need to clean house is what they need to do.
Yeah, I think that's what they're going to do. They're going to cut Cutler or try to trade him. The thing is with Cutler, he's a decent quarterback. There are a ton of teams that would love to have him.
Oh yeah,
I mean.
Cleveland would love to have him. I'm telling you right now, if you look at the entire league, there's only about – I don't know if there's a quarterback out there that I wouldn't take over Brian Hoyer or Johnny Manziel. I mean, maybe none of the third-string guys are like the Texans or the Cardinals, but short of that.
Would you want RG3?
I'd say, how could he be any worse? That's the question.
Could he be any better?
What do you mean? I know. Could he be any worse than the guys that they have? Is what I'm saying.
Right, I know, but could he actually be better?
I don't know. It depends. I think they ruined him that rookie season. I do, but
yeah. I
don't know.
But that hit on Jimmy Clausen was dirty. He was going down, he was sliding, and then I forget who it was for the Lions came in, lowered his helmet, hit him right in the side of the head.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't even a question as to whether it was he was. I mean, it was a clear intent, and and then the other guy stomped on one of the offensive linemen.
Raiola. I think he got a 1-game suspension.
Good.
If I thought I saw that. He said it was unintentional.
Oh, bullshit.
But, I mean, there's a little gif of the video. He looks like he's trying to jump over, but he's looking straight down and happens to, extend his leg right onto Ego Ferguson's ankle.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was totally intentional. But this line seems interesting. I mean, they're 11-4. They've got a good defense. I just don't know if they can find a way to score. They're going to be tough. But short of that, I think it's one and done for them in the playoffs. Because if they don't win, they go on the road, right? Or no, they would have would they be the number one? No.
If they win, I mean, this is the way it breaks down. Whoever loses is playing the Cowboys in the first round.
Okay.
Between the Packers and the
Lions.
Between the Packers and the Lions, yeah. Whoever wins that game is going to be the number 2 seed, and whoever loses that game is going to be playing the Cowboys. And then it's funny because basically if the Cowboys win, if the Cowboys beat whoever they play, they're going to play the other team in the second round. So they don't really care who gets in because they have to play both of them or one way or the other. So yeah, it's loser gets the Cowboys, winner gets a bye. Essentially, is what's on the line there. And the Lions, I think the Lions need to play at home.
Yeah.
I think the Lions need to win this game at Lambeau if they're going to have any true shot in the playoffs. Because if they're the number 6 seed and they're on the road the whole way through, it's going to be really hard to go through. They would have to go through Dallas and then probably Seattle.
Right.
And then if they get through that, they're probably going to Green Bay after that. So it's...
I think the Lions, see the thing though, there's a couple teams I think, if Seattle gets home field, that I think are capable of knocking them off in Seattle. Cowboys, because they've already done it, they've shown they can do it, and the Lions because they've got enough defense to shut down Seattle's offense. But again, the trouble they're going to run into is can they score points on that Seattle defense, which is right now just Jesus, are they, oh man, they've really rounded into Super Bowl form in Seattle. It's been something.
Yeah, they've certainly come around. But let's talk about your team, Greg. The Cleveland Browns, they almost spoiled the Panthers' day on Sunday. But Cam Newton made a few moves there, leading the team back. And they get a tight win, but they still get the win. 17-13 over Cleveland. So the Panthers, for the time being, slide into the number 1 spot in the NFC South at 6-8-1.
They are 1 game away from completing the win out and win the division scenario that I've predicted for them. But that was an ugly game. Everybody's like, Cam Newton played pretty well. I didn't see much of anybody playing very well in that game.
Cam Newton played okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Brian Hoyer was decent.
Well, yeah, Johnny Manziel got hurt, which of course he did. And
gets his hamstring hurt in the second quarter.
Right, but
some funny memes with a picture on the sideline of them working on him, and he just has this terrible look on his face, but yeah,
Panthers are headed for the big showdown game against the Falcons this weekend.
They're I don't know what to do with that. Well, I had this thing on Johnny Manziel with a bunch of stupid reporters on Twitter being stupid, namely Darren Ravel, who of course is an evil corporate robot. But we'll move on. We'll go to we'll bring in the Panthers into the discussion of the Falcons, who, as this game started, it looked like they were on a road to bad things. The Saints returned the opening kickoff, 99 yards, almost getting into the end zone. They score on the next play.
Yep.
And, 15 seconds into the game, and you're already down 7-0 at home, on the road to the Saints, who, they hadn't been great at home, but it looked like it was going to be all over for them. But not the case. They rally. They hold the Saints to only 14 points, a touchdown in the first quarter, a touchdown in the fourth quarter. And they rally for a 30-14 win over the Saints. The Saints' 5th consecutive loss at home, something that was unthinkable, even a year ago.
Hell, 6 months ago.
Right, and so the Falcons, they move up to 6-9, and they eliminate the Saints and move up to the NFC South title game next week against the Panthers.
It's a showdown for the division.
Mm-hmm.
I like the Falcons in that game. I think the Falcons are. They're not good. You can't really say they're good at all. But they had a 5-game losing streak in the middle of the season, and since then they've been 4-3. So they're a little over 500. But they've played better football in the second half of the season than they did in the first.
Right, and I think the thing that's the most important for them is they're scoring points.
Right.
The
defense is terrible, but they are scoring points.
Right, 30 points against the Saints, 20 against Pittsburgh, 37 against Green Bay. They beat the Cardinals with 29 points. They barely lost the Cleveland game with 24 points, but they're putting up numbers, and that's if they can at least score some points, they'll be fine. And I think they can put up points against this Panthers team because the Panthers defense is not what it was last year. They've been better in the last few weeks, but not what they were last year. And Cam Newton, I don't think he can play that sort of game to get in any sort of foot race with the Falcons. And the game, where's the game at? Is it in?
It's in Atlanta.
In Atlanta? Then that gives the Falcons a little bit more of an advantage. And going forward, either one of these teams are going to play the Cardinals in the first round,
right?
Without a quarterback,
exactly.
And I think that's a prime time for the Falcons, who they already beat the Cardinals at home. They could beat the Cardinals again in a first-round playoff game, I think.
Well, that's
more so than the Panthers could, I think.
We joked about it all season that one of the whoever won that NFC South was going to end up going on to a first-round win. At the time, we didn't realize they'd be playing the Cardinals, who have no quarterback. Now it's almost a guarantee that if the Falcons win this, they're probably going to move on in the playoffs because I just don't know how the Cardinals score points at this. Mm-hmm. I just don't know how they do it. How?
Right. But the thing is, you win that game and your reward is going on the road to Seattle.
Well, yeah.
Or if if somebody beats the Cowboys, then you go to Lambeau maybe.
Still, though, you've got a team that will be 7-9 that will be into the second round of the playoffs more than likely. Yeah. And I don't think the Falcons are capable of. Well, I don't know. They scored a lot of points against the Packers when they played at Lambeau.
Yeah, but the defense still isn't there. They scored a lot of points, but they also gave up a whole lot.
Yeah,
they were down 30 points in that game before they started to come back.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that that's.
I'm not. No, I don't think they're going to do anything. But what was a joke has become almost a reality now. They're going to get the Cardinals if they beat the Panthers. They're going to get the Cardinals in the first round, and I just don't know how the Cardinals score points. Now, granted, it's a lot easier to score on the Atlanta Falcons than it is on the Seattle Seahawks, but still.
No, I
just don't see it.
We'll talk about it when we get there. I saw this thing in person, man. They can't even make a pass more than 5 yards down the field.
I know.
If they do, it's lucky, and if they do anything else, it's pass interference. But we'll move down to your other team, Greg, the Green Bay Packers. Go into Tampa Bay, not the most terribly impressive showing by the Packers, but they do what they need to do in a 23 win over the Buccaneers because the Buccaneers are awful. And they clinched their playoff spot, and they set up the NFC North title game against the Lions in Lambeau this week.
This team is just not good on the road. It's as simple as that. They just aren't a good football team on the road. And if they don't get home field throughout the playoffs, they might win their first game at home and they'll get the bye and get a home game. But after that, it's going to be trouble. They're going to have to hope that somebody knocks off Seattle or something because they are just not good on the road. And this game, if the Buccaneers had any sort of offense, this would have been a completely different game. Defense played good, but again, you're shutting down the Buccaneers, so how much stock do you put in that?
Zeppo McCown, 147 yards.
Yes.
For those scoring at home, it is Josh McCown.
Yeah. Zeppo is the forgotten McCown.
Yes.
But, yeah, the Packers not good on the road, and that's going to be a real problem for them come playoff time, unless they get home field throughout. But other short of that, I just don't see them going very far in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. It was 10-3 at half, and then they scored another 10 points late in the fourth quarter. Just, I don't know. I think it was also one of those things where the Buccaneers are like, look, we're almost at the finish line of this thing, and let's see, who do they play this week? They play the Saints this week. Two teams that have nothing to play for. And, God, if you're the Buccaneers management, you want like hell for this team to lose.
Yeah.
To secure the number 1 overall pick. But if you're the Buccaneers players, you say, hey, the Saints, we could beat the Saints. We almost beat them earlier in the year, right?
Right. Well, if it were me, if I'm Lovie Smith, I'm starting Zeppo McCown this week, not Josh. I'm going with Zeppo. I'm grabbing a guy out of the parking lot and going, suit up, you're playing quarterback. I'm losing this game because I think the Buccaneers are in a situation where if they can get a good quarterback, and I think if they can get Marcus Mariota, that improves them significantly right out of the gate. Because they've got Mike Evans, who's just been a great wide receiver this year, with nobody to throw him the ball, really. You know, they've got some decent talent on offense. The defense has shown that it can play pretty solid football. They're not that far away. So, yeah, I'm losing this game at all costs because I want that number 1 pick if I'm the Bucs. Because
if they win, it looks like they'll probably be right there in the mix with Jacksonville and Oakland. I don't know, or in the Jets. I don't know how the tiebreakers work out with that. But then Tennessee would get the first overall pick, and they're probably going to go with Mariota if they get the chance.
Yeah, I think Mariota's your number 1 pick. Yeah, unless the Jets get it, they'll take Jameis Winston because they're the Jets.
But, yeah, that's what I was going to ask. If Tampa Bay falters and they get Jameis Winston, I mean, they get the positive of keeping him in Florida? They can sell tickets?
Yeah. I'm not. If I'm an NFL team, I'm staying away from Jameis Winston. First off, he's going to be only 2 seasons of college football. And if we've noticed anything, it's Johnny Manziel proved that it's a completely different animal when you're playing in the NFL.
Especially from an off-the-field standpoint, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Because all the stuff Johnny did in college, it's like, oh, he's just fun-loving Johnny football.
Uh-huh.
But once he got to the Cleveland, everything he did was scrutinized.
Yep.
And Jameis Winston has a whole lot more off-the-field issues than I think Johnny Manziel ever did.
Exactly.
And from what I understand, that's actually a lot of NFL executives are kind of souring on Jameis Winston because of those things. So we'll see if he, maybe he's one of those guys that drops like a rock and, goes down a few spots in the draft where he shouldn't be. And then the Jets can pick him up. But we'll move on. The last 2 more early games here. Really what was essentially a playoff game for both these teams, the Chiefs and the Steelers. The Steelers pull one out 20-12. Not a terribly impressive day by the Steelers, but honestly I thought this was a game that was lost by the Chiefs, and specifically Andy Reid. I think it was in the first half. It was 10-6, and the Chiefs had the opportunity to, it was like a 4th down, and they were at like the 45 inside of a minute left, and they had the opportunity to either go for it, and maybe get a touchdown to take the lead, or just take the points and make it a 10-9 game going into the second half. And Andy Reid went for it on like 4th and 2, ran a terrible play right up the middle against the Steelers defense. This is going to eat you up the middle, and then they lose out on the points, and as the game went on, that turned out to be a pretty big play. And the Steelers, they weren't that far ahead of the Chiefs, obviously only an 8-point win, but the Chiefs were just never able to get back into it. They never established any rhythm, and they still haven't thrown a touchdown to a wide receiver this year. They have 1 week left to do it. If they don't throw a touchdown to a wide receiver against the Chargers, I mean, do you realize how hard it is?
You've almost got to try not to do it.
Right. You have to try to not throw to your receivers for this to happen. But they've somehow done it through 16 weeks. And now they've got to hope that the Chargers, 3 teams in front of them lose, that they have to beat the Chargers, and then Baltimore has to win or lose, and Houston would have to lose to Jacksonville before the Chiefs can slide their way in there. And they made their own bed here. They were on a hot run. They looked like they were trying to get into the form that they were in last year, and now they've squandered it away. And now the Steelers on the other side of it, they're 10-5. They might just damn well win the stupid division, and they might be one of the scariest teams to play in the playoffs going forward.
I think they are. I absolutely think they are. I think Bill Simmons called them the monkey wrench team.
Yeah, and
they absolutely are. If I could make a Super Bowl prediction right now, I would take the Steelers out of the AFC just because they're one of those teams that could they go into New England and beat them? I think they absolutely could.
They could.
Yeah, and I like them against anybody else in the AFC. The Broncos I don't know what's going on with the Broncos, but the Steelers they're definitely a monkey wrench team, and the Chiefs, wow, I'm sure there was a game somewhere along the way that they let get away that they probably should have won that made all the difference in this. I just can't think of which one it is, but the Steelers are scary right now, and I'm not wanting to play them if I'm anybody. They're I like them a lot as the team. Every year we go into the playoffs, and there are two clear favorites. Like last year it was Seattle, and I forget who. But, it was all the Broncos. And it
was the Seattle and the Broncos, and that came to fruition.
But usually it doesn't. Usually you don't get that matchup, and this is the year. I look at it and go, "This is the year where it's going to be okay." Everybody's thinking New England, Seattle, and the Steelers are going to come along and ruin that for everybody. And I really like the way they're playing right now. I shouldn't say I like the way they're playing. I like the way their luck's going for them right now. Mm-hmm. But it's going to be interesting, very interesting.
You were talking about the games they lost when they shouldn't. I can point out the two that are definites. Well, three. I mean, if you want to look at the whole season.
They lost to the Raiders.
They lost to the Raiders on Thursday night.
Yep.
In Oakland. They lost in Arizona when Drew Stanton was starting, 17-14. And go all the way back to week 1. They lost to the Titans
yes.
at home.
Yep.
And we've established now that the Titans are a horrible football team.
Right.
And I mean, obviously you look back at the whole season and you say, how the hell do you lose your home opener to the Tennessee Titans?
And if I remember, it wasn't even really close. The Titans
26-10.
Yeah, they just went in and worked them over.
Yeah. There's plenty of – you take that game, the Tennessee game, the Oakland game. The Arizona game is more or less – you could kind of go either way with that one.
Right.
Because Arizona's defense was playing at the top of their game at that point. But even if you take those 2 wins, they're a 10-win team and they're in the playoffs right now.
The worst one, because the first week of the season, anything happens. We've seen it.
Yeah.
The one that you got to go to is, and they knew this going into this game, that even back when they played it, that this game was important for their playoff hopes, was the one against the Raiders. Mm-hmm. And we even talked about it on the show. We said they can't let this one get away from them. They need this game. This is the one they have to win, and they lost. And you can hang it all on that, I think. That's it. If you can't go out and beat a horrible Raiders team, then you got nobody to blame but yourself. And that's where I think it went off the rails for them.
Yep. Closing out the early slate of games, the Patriots go into New York, and they know they just have to beat the lowly Jets, and they clinch a first-round bye. Easy, right? Not so much. The Patriots, I don't know what's going on with them in some of these games. They just kind of sleepwalk through.
Well, the Jets always play them tough for some reason.
Yeah, but the Jets are terrible.
I know. Well, the defense isn't terrible, but
Geno Smith is terrible.
He's awful.
He's awful. But it's kind of a slog fest that the Patriots pull out there at the end, 17-16. Didn't they block the field goal late in this game to keep it ahead too? Just a tip by Vince Wilfork, and the Patriots win 17-16, and they clinch a first round bye. And with the Broncos losing on Monday night, they clinch home field advantage throughout the AFC playoffs.
Yeah, and it's. I'm not gonna put a lot of stock in that game against the Jets because Rex Ryan has their number when it comes to defending the Patriots. I don't know why, and who did I hear? Was it Dan Patrick? I think said that a smart playoff team would hire Rex Ryan right now to run the defense in the playoffs because
well, he's gonna get fired.
Oh yeah,
more likely than not. But I think you look at what he's done with the Jets. He's had terrible quarterbacks.
Oh yeah,
his defense has always been at the very least solid. Mm-hmm. He's never had a bad defense really. At minimum, they've been solid and reliable. But, I mean, Geno Smith, Michael Vick, Mark Sanchez. He went to 2 AFC title games with Mark Sanchez at the beginning.
Right.
If you remember.
Uh-huh.
And, I mean, knocked off the Colts once. You know, and they were right there with the opportunity to go to the Super Bowl with Mark Sanchez and Rex Ryan. So, you know, he's had a lot of ancillary stuff around him, whether it was, you know, the stuff with his wife, you know, that was a couple of years ago, and the off-the-field stuff, just because it's New York and that's what happens. But I mean, he's going to be the first fired coach to get rehired going into next season, right?
Oh, I would think so, yeah.
He has a job next year.
Yeah, absolutely. As a defensive coordinator, if nothing else.
Right.
Because the guy, he's a wizard when it comes to defense. I mean, he's really good at it. Mm-hmm. And I'm just thinking of teams out there. Well, we talked about Miami. How much better would Miami be with Rex Ryan as their defensive coordinator next season?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if the Dolphins had fired Joe Philbin, I would say throw Rex Ryan down there.
Yeah.
I think that could have been one of the first places for him to go.
Well, not only that, but Ryan Tannehill would be the best quarterback he's ever had in the NFL.
Right.
Yeah.
No, exactly. Or maybe you throw him. Maybe Chip Kelly hires him in Philadelphia to be their defensive coordinator next year.
Sure. Yeah.
You know. But he's going to be right there. But I mean, and then there's a bunch of these teams that are probably going to fire their coaches. Like the Titans should fire Ken Wisenhunt, right?
Yeah. How did that guy ever take a team to the Super Bowl?
Kurt Warner played awesome.
Okay.
Well, but that was the thing. He was always labored as a quarterback guru because of what he did with, you know, Ben Roethlisberger and what he kind of did to help Phillip Rivers' resurgence the last couple of years, and then what he did with Kurt Warner in Arizona.
But okay, the three names you just mentioned, do you think those guys wouldn't have been good without Ken Wisenhunt? You know, I think Roethlisberger and Rivers and Kurt Warner are all going to be pretty good quarterbacks with or without Ken Wisenhunt.
But he was supposed to come in and groom Jake Locker, and that didn't happen.
Yeah, that hasn't worked out so well, has it?
Yeah. So he's going to be fired. Jim Harbaugh's gone. Hell, you know what? Rex Ryan to San Francisco?
I could see that.
I mean, with the defensive talent they already have?
Yeah, but you still got the quarterback issue.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. That's the problem there.
How about Rex Ryan to Oakland?
Yeah, I mean, Tony Sperano's not going to hold on there, and I think they found their quarterback there with Derek Carr. They were the 3-12, but Derek Carr has actually been a quite good surprise for them.
Well, and if I think I heard this watching the game that they haven't played bad football the last 6-8 weeks. The Raiders. Now that not to say that they're good or anything, but Sperano's done a pretty solid job with them. Is what I get out of it, but. Yeah. They'll go with somebody. I think that's where Harbaugh's going to end up myself. But
with the Raiders?
Yeah.
Not with Michigan?
No.
They're offering him so much money, though.
Yeah, but that's the thing is, though, his wife wants to stay in the Bay Area, and I think that's going to play a role in it. And why would he go? He's taking a team to the Super Bowl in the NFL. Why would you go back to college?
For the same reason that Nick Saban went back, for the full control. Because I think Harbaugh. I mean, if he goes to the Raiders, he has to. I think he's in a good position when somebody gives him more opportunity to kind of control the whole thing.
Yeah.
And with the Raiders, you're not going to get that.
No.
You know, Mark Davis is always going to have his hands in it.
I don't want him to go to Michigan. I don't want Michigan to become that good again.
But I mean, also, I mean, he wants to stay in the Bay Area. Well, the Raiders may not be staying in the Bay Area, so I don't know.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Yeah,
that happen.
He might go to the Raiders. They've got one more year, and then the next thing he knows, him and his wife are moving to San Antonio.
You're right, or the second team in Los Angeles.
Right.
But let's move on to the later games, and begrudgingly, we'll start in.
Yeah, what happened there
in Dallas? Well, okay.
First off, your team clinched. They had nothing to play for.
Right. The Colts had already clinched the division, and if they win out, maybe they get the third seed. Maybe not. I think they were pretty much solid in the fourth seed. So really not a whole lot to play for. They sat T.Y. Hilton. Okay. But, man, that was still a terrible game.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the first series, it was bad from the start. First series, the Cowboys get the ball. They're going down. It's a third down. The Colts stop them, except for there's a stupid taunting penalty. Guy, tackles him in the backfield and then just kind of stands over him like, yeah, look, I tackled you. And, of course, oh, yeah, good. Flag comes in. So then the Cowboys go down and they get a touchdown out of the drive. All right, fine. Whatever. 7-0. No big deal. Colts get the ball, and it looks like they're going to go 3 and out. And then they execute a perfectly timed fake punt. As, the receiver goes out, there's nobody around him. Pat McAfee throws up a nice little aerial pass, gets it, just gives him enough time for the receiver to get under it. And the receiver just, as it was emblematic of the whole entire day for the Colts, can't catch the damn football when he's wide open. And so then the Cowboys get the ball on the 19-yard line. And the very next play is a pass to Des Bryant. It's 14-0 before you even blink. And it was just all downhill from there. The Colts could not catch a ball to save their life. So Andrew Luck was kind of left out to dry. He can do whatever he wanted to do. It just, the receivers weren't there for him.
Well, they were smart to take him out of the game, too.
Yeah, and the defense could not tackle just couldn't tackle. They were trying to tackle everyone's shoulder pads instead of their bodies. And it just won right over because the Cowboys had everything to play for, and the Colts didn't really. At a certain point, it's like, well, okay, we're just kind of go through the motions here, and it got out of hand. And Matt Hasselbeck came in at the end and avoided the first shutout in like 31 years for the Colts. So thank you, Matt Hasselbeck, for that. But the thing is, this isn't the first beatdown the Colts have taken this year. There's this game, there's the Patriot game, and the Steeler game.
They're not. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. They've got a great quarterback and not a whole lot else going on.
I know.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, at a certain point, it became pretty obvious what. I mean, Andrew Luck in his time so far has thrown a lot of interceptions. He's been a little turnover prone, but I think that's only because he sees the talent around him and realizes that he has to do everything on his own, and so he tries to force it a lot.
Sounds like a guy he was playing on Sunday.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and it's actually very similar. Like, if the Colts had a running game that they could rely on, like the Cowboys do with DeMarco Murray, then he doesn't have to do everything by himself. In the same way that Tony Romo hasn't had to this year with the way DeMarco Murray's played. And DeMarco Murray was limited with his hand thing, but this was also good for the Cowboys that they got away so quickly that they could say, hey, DeMarco, take a seat, don't hurt your hand. We're going to need you going into the playoffs for sure.
Well, but it just shows you the importance. It's a passing game these days, but it just shows you the importance of having a running game. Yep. The difference between Tony Romo with a running game and without one, and you're seeing it now with Andrew Luck. He has to do it all by himself. Did I read right that the Colts gained 1 yard on the ground in this game?
No, Boom Herron had 3 yards.
Okay, so 3 yards. But there's your problem right there. 3 yards.
Yeah,
and they've got. I mean, really, what's their record now? 10-5?
Well, actually, yeah, you're right. As a team, Boom Herron had 3 yards. Trent Richardson had 1 yard, and Zerlin Tipton had -3 yards.
So it came out to 1 yard.
Yeah. Zerlin Tipton, he has 1 carry in his NFL career for -3 yards.
They should cut him tomorrow and never let him play again, just so that's a stat line forever. But yeah, that's that's
1 yard rushing in this game.
I mean, come on, that tells you all you need to know right there. Yeah. If you really look at this Colts team, and this isn't like last year where they put together a couple of just perfect football games. It's kind of a miracle that they're at 10 wins because there are a lot of holes in this team. I mean, a lot.
Yeah, and I'm a Colts fan, but I'm not going to deny that. I mean, they've had the benefit of playing in a terrible division. And they've won all their division games. They beat the teams that they're supposed to beat in Tennessee, Jacksonville, and Houston, which is good. They play the AFC North, and they won every game except the Pittsburgh game against the North. But again, in these games against the big teams, I mean, even week 1 against Denver, they were down big before having to come back.
Right.
Philadelphia the next week on a Monday night, They were up and down, but mostly down in that game, and they had to try to make the comeback. And then for the most part, it's been easy sailing, except for the dominations by Pittsburgh and New England, and now Dallas. Mm-hmm. It's their losses are huge, and their wins are over really bad teams for the most part. But and the only questionable one is they had to eke out that win at Cleveland a couple weeks ago, but. this team can't all be Andrew Luck, and I would have hoped that at least the ownership, maybe if between binges, Jim Irsay can see, hey, this is the same thing that happened when we had Peyton Manning, because even one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and you see it with the ultimate results where they weren't getting the Super Bowls or they were losing the first round, because yes, a quarterback is essential. If you have a good quarterback, it solves a whole lot of other problems and can cover up a lot of problem spots. But if that's the only thing you have going for you, if you can't run the ball, if your receivers aren't everything went wrong for the Colts on Sunday. They couldn't run the ball, and then when Andrew Luck was getting open and finding his receivers, they weren't catching the ball, and the defense couldn't tackle. They couldn't stop the run. They couldn't stop the pass. They were just getting run over. Everything that was possibly wrong with this team went wrong on Sunday, and they need a lot of help. I would start with the defense, but they also need offensive line help. They need running back help. They need a lot.
Yeah,
they really do. And as good as Andrew Luck is, he could be a whole lot better if they just gave him something to work with.
Absolutely.
So, but for the time being, as long as Houston doesn't have a quarterback, the Colts will be winning the division for a couple more years. But that's where they're at. But all credit to the Cowboys too, because as bad as the Colts played, Dallas played just as well. Tony Romo, I should have started you, Tony. I'm sorry. If I had started you, we would have won the fantasy championship and you'd have a ring. But I dropped the ball on that one and started Drew Brees instead.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What were you thinking?
I was thinking that they were the Falcons and the Saints were going to have a shootout, and that the Colts were going to play a little bit better against Dallas than they did.
Well, does this exercise all Tony Romo's demons this season, do you think?
Well, historically he's been terrible in December, right?
Right, yeah.
This December, 10 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions.
That's what I mean. Can we still hang the December? We can't. We can still wait, and part of me still thinks it's going to happen, the interception that ends their season by him. But I think he's exercised all of his December demons this year. I think, and the Cowboys
don't know all of them, but
a lot of them.
He's been playing. Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, but again, it's what we said with the Colts, and comparing Luck to Romo a little bit. Now that he has a reliable running game,
right,
and the defense is actually, despite everyone thought it was going to be a disaster, they've been a solid defensive unit. They're not the best, but they're certainly not the worst, and they're right there in the middle of the pack. And that's all they need to do when the offense is clicking like it is for the Cowboys, especially over the last few weeks. And that's the other thing is they're getting hot at the right time.
Yep.
This isn't like them going off on a run early in the year and pulling away. This was they were winning and they were ahead in the division, but they were still kind of in the middle of the pack. And now they've exploded over the last couple weeks, and they should demolish a hapless Redskins team in Week 17. Yeah. Even though the Cowboys really don't have anything to play for. If they win and some other weird stuff happens, they could possibly slide into the second seed. Unlikely. So they're probably going to be in the 3 seed, so they don't really have anything to play for either.
Yeah, but you know what, though? I mean, we've seen it happen, though. I mean, how many times have we seen, like, a team sit their starters and they go into the playoffs the next week and they fall flat on their faces, or in 2 weeks if they've got to bye? Yeah. I think you got to keep playing to win right till the end. I mean, now, granted, if they get up like 31-0 on the Redskins, yeah, sit everybody down and that's that. But
yeah.
But I tell you, man, a lot of people are thinking that we might see a rematch of another Cowboys-Steelers Super Bowl this season.
I'm not sure about that.
I don't know if I'd bet on it yet, but it's not as crazy as it sounds.
It's a possibility, though, for sure. Let's move on to these other games. The Giants beat the Rams 37-27.
Good uniform matchup. Not great uniform matchup, but other than that, really no reason to even talk about it.
In Oakland, the Buffalo Bills, oh, man. They were hanging around in the playoff race. They were right there.
Yeah.
And then they go on the road and drop one to the Raiders, 24-26. Good day for the Raiders. Derek Carr was decent, but Kyle Orton actually had a pretty good game there for the Bills, but not enough, and they lose, and they're officially out of the playoff race.
And that's what the Raiders' third win this season now?
Yeah, 3-12.
Yeah, and we thought they were going to go 0-16, but guess not.
So close. But we'll move on to the Sunday night game that I had the pleasure of seeing in person. The Cardinals, man, I feel so bad for this Cardinals team because they were playing so well. The defense had been playing really well up until this week. And Ryan Lindley was a starter. So how did he get 216 yards of offense?
He did?
What? That's
45-yard passes would come up to about 200. Yeah, so I guess so.
I guess. I don't know. But I mean, sitting in the stadium, it didn't seem like he was getting that much yards. Maybe he amassed some in the fourth quarter. We had left. Once it got to 28-6, we were like, this thing is not going to get any better before it gets any worse. So we actually left.
Watching it on TV, I don't know how he came up with 200 yards.
Yeah, but the Seahawks, they win 35-6. It was 14-3 going into half, 14-6 in the third quarter, and that's what I kind of expected of the game. That it was going to be tight, and the Seahawks would probably pull it out. But they started to really pull away there in the fourth quarter. I mean, they've pulled up 596 yards of offense, and it actually could have been a worse score. But the Seahawks went 0 for 3 on field goals during the game. And the Cardinals were really only moving the ball or staying in the game because the Seahawks, I mean, they lead the league in penalties, and they were just all over the place with these penalties all game long. I'm trying to see if I can pull up their penalty stats, but that was what was keeping this. Here we go. They had 11 penalties for 97 yards.
Wow! Compared
to the Cardinals 1 for 5 yards in the game. And we were sitting next to a couple Seahawks fans at this game, and they were just saying, "We're trying to give you this football game." But, I mean, the penalties were part of the Cardinals' offense there for a little bit. They were just trying to chuck it downfield and hope for a pass interference call, which they got a few times. But
I tell you, watching it, and do you think the Cardinals' defense just kind of said, you know what, we're not going to score any points, screw it? Or did the Seattle offense just suddenly find itself? And
I think part of it was the Seattle offense finding a gear. And, Russell, the thing that really stood out to me was Russell Wilson and what he does, and this is what kind of pisses me off about him, to be perfectly honest, is he's never dominant. He does that just enough. Mm-hmm. He's always just out of somebody's reach. He always puts the ball just over somebody's fingers. And yeah, that's a great skill that he's getting it in where it needs to go and avoiding the sacks and all that, but he's not Tom Brady. He's not Peyton Manning. He's not even Aaron Rodgers, where they can just be dominant at certain stretches. He's doing just enough, but over time it racks up to 339 yards of offense, 2 touchdowns, 2 really long passes to Luke Wilson, the tight end, for touchdowns. Which, I mean, 3 receptions for 139 yards for Luke Wilson.
Hey, why not?
Sure,
somebody's got to catch those passes.
And Marshawn, we left after Marshawn Lynch's really long run.
Yeah.
And that run, that was the Cardinals. They weren't trying to tackle Lynch. They were all trying to rip the football out of his hands.
Yes, I watched that, yeah.
Yeah, so I saw when I got home, everyone like, oh, my God, did you see this Marshawn Lynch run? And I was like, yeah, did you actually see it? Because he didn't really do a whole lot. Yeah, he kept it in bounds and held on to the football, but nobody was actually trying to tackle him.
No, I mean, it was Patrick Peterson when it just kind of swatted at his hands as he ran by.
Yeah, Patrick Peterson, by the way, has been terrible over the last few weeks.
Yes, he has.
He's been really bad.
Yep.
But it was just so clear that Ryan Lindley wasn't the answer. And it was just so frustrating that, they put in Logan Thomas for like one play. And it was like, oh, well, have they given up on Ryan Lindley? Maybe they're going to give Logan Thomas a shot here at quarterback. And he went in for one play and threw an incompletion, but then Ryan Lindley came right back on the field. I was like, and I kind of joked to the people around me. I'm like, well, thus ends the Logan Thomas experiment.
Well, I know that
he's just getting one pass, but I guess Lindley was getting something fixed.
Going into that game, they had a package of plays set up for
right.
Yeah,
they had practiced for all week with both of them, setting up different things. And so I don't know why they didn't even attempt it. But they didn't really give him any shot. Logan Thomas is going to start this week against the 49ers, though. Not that that's going to make a whole big difference. But, I mean, they're in the playoffs. They clinched a spot. So I guess they're just going to go for it and say, well, we got to see what we have.
Right.
Because Ryan Lindley isn't it.
No.
He was just flat out terrible. And that's why I feel so bad for this Cardinals team. I think the defense in this game, they also got tired out because they were on the field a whole hell of a lot.
Yeah.
Time of possession was more even than it felt like, but Ryan Lindley can't complete passes. He just can't. Every other play was like a fade downfield down the sidelines, and it either was caught, incomplete, or a pass interference. And that's all they were hoping for. But he's not the answer. Logan Thomas is going to get a shot.
Well,
the Cardinals are sunk.
They've got nothing to lose.
No matter how good the defense plays, they're sunk. When it was 14-6, I even said, I'm like, they're not going to get a touchdown.
Oh no.
It's a one-score game, but they're not getting when they got the second touchdown. I even said, I'm like, this is it. That's done. This team is not going to score 2 touchdowns today. The only thing they could have hoped for is the defense had to create a turnover, had to get a pick six, had to do something. Because even when they got favorable field position, like a couple times the Cardinals actually started on their own 45, but they couldn't get more than 15 yards at a time. They got a couple long plays down the field, and that got them their couple field goals, but that was it. And even those field goals weren't exactly chip shots; they were pretty long. It just, I feel terrible for this Cardinals team because they were having a season to end all seasons. The defense was playing tremendously, and now they can't do anything because they're down to their 5th string quarterback.
Oh, who's a rookie, right?
Right, and I mean Ryan Lindley, he wasn't even on the team.
No, I said, he was on the street 2 weeks ago. And
he was on the Chargers practice squad, and they cut him in the preseason. The Cardinals did, so that you have to go out and re-sign a guy that you cut already. And then you had him starting over who was your third string quarterback?
I think the reason they went with him was because he at least knew the offense a little bit.
But so you would think that Logan Thomas would have too. He was at least on the roster.
But that's that thing, I think, where the coaches, I honestly, I don't know that your chances are any worse with Logan Thomas than they would have been with Ryan Lindley, because if Lindley was good enough to play in the NFL, he would be playing in the NFL.
Yeah.
Okay, you drafted Logan Thomas, or you signed him as a free agent, whatever. You must have saw something in him, so why not go with the guy that's been with you the whole way? Yeah, he's a rookie, but I think that Lindley proved that having experience and having played in an NFL game a few times really isn't that big of a help if you don't have the talent to back it up.
No. And after the game, listening to the post-game radio show on the way home, the Cardinals color guy
committed suicide in the booth.
he was being really nice. Someone's like, well, what do you see as the future for Ryan Lindley? He's like, he's getting the opportunities, the reps, and maybe he can have a successful career as a backup quarterback in this league. And I was like, no. Any NFL team that saw this game is like, well, we don't even want him as an emergency option.
Yeah.
Because he can't play. Sorry, Ryan Lindley, you're not an NFL quarterback. This isn't your line of work. You should go back to San Diego State, finish your degree, and go get a real job, because this isn't going to be your job.
I don't know that they would have been any worse off giving Logan Thomas a shot, because
right.
You're not going to beat really probably anyone with a guy that was on a practice squad 2 weeks ago that wasn't with your team at the time.
Yep.
You're certainly not going to beat the Seattle Seahawks with a guy like that. So, Thomas has been in the whole season. He knows the offense, and you know what? Maybe he becomes. Maybe he's. Nah, you know what? They're done. You're right. They had a great season. We talked about it when
rug got pulled out from underneath them.
When Palmer went down, we knew they were in trouble, and then when Stanton went down, we were like, "That's it. It's over." And it's over. Mm-hmm. They're going to lose to whoever wins the NFC South, which is wow.
Sad. I mean, they got to hope that. I guess their only real shot is that if Drew Stanton is even like 85% for the playoffs, they have to throw him in there.
I would think, yeah.
Like, if it's even possible for him to – because he actually suited up. He was on the sidelines. If it ever got to a dire situation where both quarterbacks got injured, they weren't ever going to play him, just to play him. But, yeah, the Cardinals sitting on top of the NFC all year, and they lose this game, and now they're out of the top seed. They're out of the NFC West lead. They could still technically win the NFC West and maybe even get one of those byes again. If they beat the 49ers and if the Seahawks lose to the Rams, I don't see either of those two things happening. And the Cardinals season is over. I mean, they're gonna have 2 more games, but that's it.
They could conceivably go 12-4 and get knocked out in the first round of the playoffs, and that's just too bad.
Yeah.
But the that spunky Rams team, that pesky Rams team, they would love nothing better than to go into Seattle and knock off the Seahawks. So,
but they already did that once in St. Louis, and with the Seahawks, they're like, if we win this game, we get the number 1 seed.
Yeah, they're
going to be playing balls out. And they're not going to lose to the Rams at home. It's just not going to happen.
Probably not, but there's always a chance.
Yeah. We'll go over to Monday nights.
What a game!
What a game! The Bengals overcoming their primetime demons. Not necessarily on the back of Andy Dalton, but just everybody else picked up the slack. Peyton Manning, 4 interceptions in this game.
He did not look good last night.
Peyton was not great. As the Bengals, they get a 37-28 win, clinch a playoff spot, and set up the AFC North title showdown. Unfortunately for the Bengals, in primetime again at Pittsburgh next week. It's funny because, our friend McCarthy on the boards, as when the Bengals Steelers game got flexed into primetime, and we all know the Bengals' problems with primetime, he even put it out like, oh no. So we have to win a Monday night game or a Sunday night game to make the playoffs, or we could lose both and fall out of the playoffs. This is my nightmare.
Well, I honestly thought
the Bengals could have easily done that and lost out, but
I really thought that's what they were going to do. I really did. I thought this is it, because the Broncos will have no trouble with them on Monday night, and then next week the Steelers are going to have no trouble with them, and they're going to be out of the playoffs. I really thought that was going to happen, but they stepped up last night. I mean, I don't know how much of it is that they stepped up, or is that the Broncos just didn't play as well as they could, but whatever the case may be, they won a primetime game last night, and they are in the playoffs now, which makes next week's game not nearly as meaningful as it would have been.
But it's still pretty meaningful in terms of home field or not. And right. I think it's probably more meaningful for the Steelers, because this Bengals team, I don't even know if they're going to win the first round game, even if they have home field. I don't know, if they get the Chargers coming in there again. It's not going to be good. If they get the Ravens coming in there, it's not going to be good. If they get – the only thing that would help them is if they play Houston again for like the 500th time in the playoffs. But, I mean, the Bengals also lost to Houston that one year when they had T.J. Yates at quarterback. So it's entirely possible that the Bengals could lose to the Texans if they play them in the playoffs again. But, I mean – kudos to the Bengals. Congratulations.
What do you think about Peyton Manning, though? I mean, there's been talk that he hasn't looked that great over the past 4 weeks. I was going to say earlier, we were talking about I forget which team we were talking about, where sometimes the team just gets good like at the 3-quarter mark of the season. Is it possible that Peyton Manning just got old 4 weeks ago?
I mean, it's possible. I don't know. One of the more under the radar Peyton Manning teams, I've ever seen. Nobody really said a whole lot about him since early on in the year. Once they got ahead, it's like, okay, well, it's going to be Denver and New England. They're going to be one of the top 2 seeds, and that's that. I don't know. I mean, they've got the second round bye or the first round bye. They're going to host either. I guess with the second seed, you can host a whole lot more teams than the first seed, but I don't know. If they have to play, say, Pittsburgh in the second round, it's not as much like we all thought it was just going to be Denver and New England in the AFC title game, and no questions about it. I think it's more of a question now, and Peyton can have his good games, and but sometimes he does throw ducks like that. In that game, and it's more common now that he's older, obviously.
Well, I think look, there's no doubt about it. I mean, it's kind of hard to argue that he's not great in bad weather.
No,
and when it started raining last night,
yeah.
When it started raining, I thought this is bad news for the Broncos, and it turns out that's exactly what happened. Yeah. But credit to the Bengals; they showed up, which no one expected them to, and. Well, we'll see where it goes from here. I think I'm with you. I don't like their chances. I think they could beat Baltimore in the playoffs. Anybody else, I'm not so sure about.
Yeah. So now that we've got through all those games, I have the playoff machine open, and we can look towards Week 17, predicting Week 17, and going into the playoffs, see what we have.
How did we do last week?
I didn't keep track.
Neither did I.
But I think we missed on a couple. Like I think we, I believe we had. I'm pretty sure we both had the Broncos beating the Bengals. First off, And then I think, did we pick Kansas City to beat the Steelers?
No, I don't think we did. I think we had the Steelers. I think we picked Cincinnati to beat Denver. I think we both said we liked the Bengals in this game. Yeah.
I could be wrong. I think we both picked Baltimore over Houston. Too.
That we did. Yeah, I know we did that. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we did okay. Not great, but fine. So as we go, this is what the playoff picture sits at before we go into Week 17. In the AFC, New England and Denver are the 1-2. Cincinnati is currently on top of the AFC North. Of course, they play Pittsburgh. They would be playing San Diego. Indianapolis is the 4 seed, and they would be hosting Pittsburgh with Baltimore, Kansas City, and Houston on the outside. In the NFC right now, the number 1 seed is the Seattle Seahawks. Number 2, the Detroit Lions. Number 3 seed is Dallas. And right now it says they'd be hosting Arizona as the 6th seed. But I've played around with the machine already. And no matter what happens between Detroit and Green Bay, the loser is the 6th seed. Arizona moves up 5 seed no matter what happens this week. Win, lose, or draw, whatever.
The Green Bay loser.
Green Bay or Detroit will be playing Dallas.
Okay, so we know that's for a fact.
Arizona will be playing Carolina or Atlanta.
Wow.
So let's go to the games. We'll start with the very first game they have up here. Baltimore and Cleveland. Do we give Baltimore a shot at making the final AFC wild card? They have to win this game. If they don't, they're eliminated. If they do, they have a shot.
You know, it's a tough call because they're the Ravens. I mean, they could come out and they could win 58-3, or they could lose. And I don't know what to make of them.
Brian Hoyer's going to be starting again, so maybe they have a little bit more stability at quarterback. But I think the Ravens have got it in their sights. They have to win this game.
I'm going with the Ravens.
Give us some of the Ravens.
Yeah, but it's a very, very soft pick for the Ravens. I would not be at all surprised to see the Browns win this game.
All right. Cowboys at Washington. Not that it matters, but I'll just give it to the Cowboys.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's see. Colts, Titans. The Titans have to lay down in this game, right?
I would think.
So I'll give that one to the Colts. Not that matters. Jacksonville at Houston. Now, again, Houston, Case Keenum starting again for Houston. But the Jacksonville Jaguars are terrible and would probably like to lose to keep their draft position intact. But not that matters to the players a whole lot.
Case Keenum is no T.J. Yates, but he's still good enough to beat the Jaguars, I think. So I'm going with the Texans.
Texans. Chargers, Chiefs. This is really the key matchup in the AFC. This determines really who moves forward. And by the way, with Baltimore winning that we had earlier, no matter what happened to the Texans, they are eliminated.
Right.
And same with the Chiefs. So this is Chargers winning, but all these games are being played at the same time for the most part.
So the Chiefs don't know that they've been eliminated yet for this pick.
Right.
Okay, then I'm going with the Chiefs.
You go with the Chiefs.
I'm going with the Chiefs at home, yep.
All right.
Well, I don't know, though. It's Phillip Rivers. It's December. It's the Chargers. No, I'm going to switch that. I'm going with the Chargers.
I don't know.
That's a tough call, yeah.
I mean, basically, it's either Baltimore or San Diego that makes it in, based on this. Oh, man. Chargers have been good recently. I got to go with the Chargers.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the Chargers, too.
All right. So, with that, I give the Chargers the 6th seed in the AFC.
One thing, though. Do the Chiefs finally get that touchdown to a wide receiver this week? I don't think they pull it off.
I don't know.
I mean, come on. If you know you're probably not going to make the playoffs, don't you just kind of go, you know what? We're not going to throw a touchdown to the wide receiver. They'll talk about that.
You think Dwayne Bowe wants to hear that?
No, but you know what? He could score 5 touchdowns on Sunday, and it's not going to help his season stats that much. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I'm going with the Chargers.
All right. Jets, Dolphins doesn't really matter. It's at Miami.
I'm taking the Dolphins. Yeah.
Bears, Vikings. Jay Cutler's final game as a Chicago Bear, most likely, going against Teddy Bridgewater.
Minnesota wants to finish strong. I'm taking the Vikings.
All right. Again, it doesn't matter. This game could have had implications, but because of Denver losing and the Bills losing, Bills at Patriots has nothing to play for in it. New England's got to be resting guys, you'd think, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so I'll give it to Buffalo just just because New England's going to be rested.
They've got the we didn't make the playoffs, so we can still kick New England's ass. So let's
and they can finish with a 9-win season, which would be nice for them.
Yep. Eagles, Giants, meaningless.
Eagles.
I'm taking the Giants.
Again, it doesn't matter. Again, it doesn't matter. Tampa Bay, New Orleans. Tampa Bay's got to be laying down too. Now for the NFC South title game. Panthers at Falcons.
For
Winner
all the marbles.
Gets the Cardinals. I got to go with the Falcons at home. I think
taking
they can
the
put up
Falcons.
the points.
Yep.
And I just don't believe in Cam Newton.
No.
By the way, remember how we mentioned last week the stupid playoff machine with the Jacksonville logo?
Yeah.
That was kind of messed up. Look at the Panthers logo, too, if you hover over it.
Oh, jeez, it switches back and forth.
Yeah. Somebody didn't do a good job. But so we have the Falcons winning, so they win the NFC South in the 4th seed. Now, Green Bay versus the Detroit Lions.
The Packers are at home. I'm taking the Packers.
I got to go with that, too. As much as I would love to see Detroit finally win the division, get a home playoff game, I don't see it.
If they got a home playoff game, I could go to it.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah. No, if it's in Detroit, I like the Lions, but the Packers, great at home and not so much everywhere else. So I got to go with the Pack in that one.
Broncos, Raiders, got to go with the Broncos.
I'm taking the Raiders.
Really?
Yeah.
In Mile High?
Yeah, because they're not the Broncos really. Well, are they? They don't have any shot at the.
Well, here's the thing: if the Broncos lose, they could actually fall down to the 3rd seed.
Okay, they're going to keep playing then. Okay, so I'm going to stay with the Broncos. Okay,
Yeah,
I thought if they had nothing to play for, I'd go with the Raiders.
Because somehow 11-5 is the same thing as 10-4-1. But if Pittsburgh wins, they'd be 11-5. If Cincinnati wins, they'll be 11-4-1. So the Broncos have to win to keep the 2nd seed.
Wait a minute. So all right.
Yeah. So I mean, in theory, but the other thing is now we're in the later games. So like the Raiders and Broncos are playing the same time as no, because the Bengals Steelers is at night.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean the Broncos know they have to win one way or the other,
right?
Because if they lose, whoever wins the Sunday night game takes the 2nd seed. So they have to win.
All right, yeah. If they've got something to play for, I take the Broncos. If they got nothing to play for, I like the Raiders to go in and do their thing. All right, so Broncos it is.
Yeah. Cardinals, 49ers. 49ers. Cardinals. There's no quarterback, man. Unless Logan Thomas is something.
I'm going to bank on that. I think the Cardinals win this game.
Okay.
I mean, you're talking about 2 great defenses with no quarterbacks. It's the weirdest game ever. But, yeah, I like the Cardinals. I think he'll turn out to be – oh, God, I don't know, though. I mean, San Francisco did manage to score 35 points.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with the Niners. You're right. Yeah, I'm switching that. I'm going with the Niners.
Seahawks and Rams. The Rams are pesky, but the Seahawks know they win this game. They win the NFC West. They win the number 1 overall seed. And they don't have to play next week. Or the week after, I should say. So they got to go. They got to go all the way, and I think they're going to beat the Rams.
Yeah, I think Seattle has really turned into the dominant team we saw last year. I got to go. As much as I would love to see the Rams win, I'm taking the Seahawks.
And then Sunday night at Pittsburgh, Bengals at Steelers. Sorry, Bengals, but the Steelers are on a roll.
Yeah, no way do the Bengals go in to Heinz Field and beat the Steelers in prime time with the playoff seeding on the line. No way.
Right. So, what we predict as being the final standings in both leagues. In the AFC, the number one and 2 seeds are the Patriots and Broncos as they currently stand. We have the Pittsburgh Steelers rallying all the way back to win the AFC North and host the San Diego Chargers in round 1. And then the 4-5 game is the Cincinnati Bengals going to Indianapolis. These 2 teams met earlier this season, if you remember, and the Colts shut out the Bengals in Indy.
I like your Colts' chances in that game. That's a good matchup for them.
If any of the teams, I don't want the Colts to play Pittsburgh. I don't want the Colts to play San Diego. Cincinnati is the team I would want to come to Indianapolis. That's their best shot at winning a game in the playoffs.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
I mean, only to probably go to New England and get their doors kicked in. But,
You never know.
It'll be the same thing as happened last year.
Tom Brady might break his leg or something. You never know.
I'd be okay with that on multiple levels.
As long as, I'm not wishing for the guy to get hurt or anything, but if he sprained his ankle really bad, it wouldn't break my heart.
I mean, he has been listed on the injury report with a shoulder injury for his entire career.
Well, he's been I was going to say he's been probable for like the last 9 years.
Right. Anyway, over in the NFC, the number 1 seed is the Seattle Seahawks, rounding into Super Bowl form at the right time. Number 2 seed is the Green Bay Packers. And as we had already kind of predicted, the Detroit Lions would go to Dallas in the wild card round, and Arizona goes to Atlanta. Again, Atlanta already beat Arizona earlier this year, even when they had a semi-decent quarterback. So see if they can repeat it. And this would be the same thing with a 7-9 team,
right?
Playing an 11-win team from the NFC South and the NFC West, with the 7-9 team probably winning. Yeah. It's a kind of a flip of what happened with New Orleans and Seattle, but
and unless Logan Thomas becomes the next whoever like Andrew Luck or somebody like that, Cardinals are done. But the Falcons are probably gonna,
or Drew Stanton comes back and makes something of it,
right?
But even then, actually, and the other thing is that's a lock for the early Saturday game, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Of the 4 wild card games, that's a lock for the early game.
Yep.
Cincinnati, Indy is probably the lock for the early Sunday game.
Yeah. Who gets the prime time?
Oh, Dallas.
Dallas, definitely. Dallas, Detroit. Yeah. Game. I don't know though. Pittsburgh's a pretty good draw too.
Yeah. But I guess in terms of national, I think they probably go with the Lions over the Chargers too.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's not a bad playoff field.
No, I mean the only thing, and this is something that somebody brought up, the AFC is the same as it's been for the last 10 years.
It really is.
I mean, you get New England, you get the Peyton Manning team, you get the Steelers, the Colts, the Bengals and the Ravens have kind of gone in and out there, and San Diego's gone in and out there.
Bengals have made the playoffs 4 straight years now. I had no idea.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you look at the NFC is interesting as hell.
Yeah.
I mean, you get Seattle and Green Bay, sure. But Dallas, Detroit, Arizona, Atlanta, new blood.
Yeah.
But then the AFC is
same old
players.
See, that I think that the AFC, the difference is that the difference between the bad teams and the good teams in the AFC, there's such a gap in between there where it's not so. NFC teams seem like they can improve faster than the AFC teams do. I don't know why that is, but it just seems like there's not as much of a gap in talent level. But I tell you, man, that Seattle team right now, good Lord. Oh. Mm-hmm. I don't like it.
Yeah, it's like I said, Russell Wilson and the offense looked, very efficient. And that defense, I mean, I saw Richard Sherman actually get burned a couple times on some long passes. But as a whole, the defense is as good as it was last year.
Russell Wilson is so frustrating. Like you talked about earlier, because he's slippery. He's just slippery. Yeah, it's like you think he's about to get his head knocked off in a sack, and all of a sudden he's gone. And he just does. Oh, it just drives me nuts.
Yeah,
this is a team that I used to like, and I don't like them at all anymore. Mm-hmm. But
so that's what we think. We'll see how it plays out. And one more week of regular season action. We have one more, basically a football show before 2015 comes in, and we'll preview the NFL playoffs and the college football playoffs.
Yeah.
Won't that be fun?
That's right.
For Greg, I'm Zach. This has been Basically a Football Show. Follow us on all of our platforms. Follow the rest of the Basically a Podcast Network. Again, for Greg, I'm Zach. This has been Basically a Football Show. Enjoy the holidays. Enjoy the holiday football. And we'll talk to you next week.
Merry Christmas, everybody.